Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Two-Way Tonight. Tonight's program will be devoted entirely to an exploration of what the World Hockey Championship is. Never heard of that. So sit back and get ready to be bored. No, actually, I've told you before, convention and news at the top of the show to say it's a big news day. So much going on. Let's get right to it. This is one of the slowest news days in the history of this program. There's plenty to tell you about, don't get me wrong. And we have two great guests, but I got to say, Congress is away. The president didn't do any events today for the press, and just not a lot of activity, but some, which we'll tell you about. And probably I'm just going to bring in our guests, and they'll be Dandy Don Meredith and John Madden to my Al Michaels. If you like sports, you got that. If you didn't, if you don't, probably means nothing to you. But uh, probably the biggest thing going on is President Trump's further comments about Vladimir Putin. Although I know people are making a big deal about it. He basically said similar to what he said over the weekend, but we'll get to that. Um, just a few reminders of things immediately after this program. You can go to stay on YouTube if you're on YouTube and watch the Moynihan Report. We'll tell you more about that as we get through the program. And then in just 48 hours, less than 48 hours, really Thursday morning, the People's Poll with input from many members of the two-way community and our hosts will be debuted on the morning meeting. And you can now watch the current episode of Next Up, my podcast, the Megyn Kelly Network. I'll tell you more about that later in the program, but you can watch that now on YouTube or listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. All right. A few rules. And if you're new to the program, write these down. If you're not new to the program, you've heard these so many times, go ahead and get on your phone and play Wordle or whatever you need to do to get through this. If you're here on the two-way platform and you want to get a question in, please raise your hand, your electronic hand. We love people who've never asked questions, and we love our returning questioners as well. If you're watching on X or on YouTube, well, you can't ask a question. If you want to ask a question, you got to figure out how to get here on the two-way platform. But you can put comments in the chat. I don't recommend it. I don't know what you get out of it. But what I do know is the ethos of the program's peace, love, and understanding. Please don't put smack in the chat. That means don't attack anybody personally. Don't say, oh my God, there's a liberal Democrat on the show. How could you do that? I don't want to hear from a liberal Democrat. That fights the ethos of the show, where we show the presumption of grace to all, and we take the opportunity to learn and understand with people who disagree with us. This is not a show where we try to create false equivalency or where we say everything's equal. It's a show where we look for whatever version of the truth we can find, and we welcome all opinions. We welcome them warmly. We don't discourage spirited debate. We love spirited debate, but we do not like personal attacks or invective. All right. So, as I said, we're just going to run through the headlines with our two spectacular guests returning for her umpteenth time on this program. And whenever she's on, she tells me she goes to the Safeway, and all anybody does is says, oh my God, that's Kristin Davison from Two-Way. Love Kristin Davison. Kristin Davison, Republican strategist. Kristin, do you ever get recognized for being on Two-Way?
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes. All right. Nice of you to lie. I got recognized on the Jersey Shore several times this weekend for Two-Way, and one woman said, God bless you for Two-Way. That's what she said. Kristin Davison is a Republican consultant. She's worked for many different people. I'll just mention two just for fun. Don't think this is her full client list, ladies and gentlemen. Governor Glenn Youngkin of the Commonwealth of Virginia and Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. Just two. And for those of you who love the Bush wing of the Republican Party, Kristin began her career, or maybe worked early in her career, for Karl C. Rove, one of the greatest political strategists currently living, and maybe in American history. Kristin, thank you for coming back. Anything you want folks to know about you that I didn't say?
No, I think you summed it up.
All right. You ever heard of Chris Jackson, who's on tonight for the first time? You ever heard of him?
I have.
All right. Mr. Jackson, I'm so glad that you're on. Chris Jackson was elected. You were elected to the Tennessee legislature when you were a teenager, correct?
I was actually elected to local office as a county commissioner at 19 and served
19.
16 years.
Okay. And what other elective office have you held?
I've been a commissioner for 16 years. Then I went on to serve as an election commissioner here in Tennessee. Also, I've served past as a party chairman, and recently went back to doing that. So trying to build up from the grassroots here in Tennessee, the party.
All right. And you never served in the legislature, despite what I thought. No. All right. No, nothing wrong with that one way or the other. Tennessee, in the Clinton Gore years, was kind of a purplish state.
Yep.
And Tennessee is Governor Ned Ray McWhorter. Was that his name? Governor
Absolutely.
McWhorter?
One of the best governors we've ever had.
And an incredible guy. Kristen, I bet you never met Red Name McWhorter.
I never had. He was a little bit before my
yeah.
time.
All right. So I met him with Bill Clinton. He made Bill Clinton look like, I don't know, like Bernie Sanders. Like he was the goodest old boy, one of the goodest old boys I ever met. And we went down to the, Bill Clinton went to see him. I think he endorsed Bill Clinton in 92. And we went to see him at the governor's mansion. And I said something. I was talking to them in a group and I said something about the governor's mansion. And he said, son, I don't live in a mansion. I live in the governor's residence. And it's owned by the people of Tennessee. He was a populist. And I never called any governor's mansion a mansion again. I just always call them the residence because you never know.
He loved vanilla wafers too.
Yeah. And goo-goo clusters.
Yep.
Yeah. Where do you live in Tennessee, sir?
About an hour and a half south of Nashville, Lawrence County.
All right. You good friends with Al Gore of Tennessee?
Al Gore was one of the people that really got me into politics when I was younger. He had just lost the 2000 election and he was doing guest lectures at Middle Tennessee. And my dad would take me up there and met Al Gore probably 10, 15 times. And he was really somebody locally that inspired me to get into public service.
Interesting. 3 of my best war stories about covering politics involve Al Gore, none of which I could tell on this platform. And we can do nearly anything on this platform. A few more questions, Chris, because I want to introduce you to folks. You're a consultant now, is that correct? He froze for me. Chris, did he freeze for you?
Yep.
He did. We'll never know. Look at that. Chris Jackson, I hope you come back. We'll wait a few more seconds. Otherwise, we're going to have to just plow ahead and never know if Chris is a consultant. Kristin, let me ask you this. Are you working on any midterm races now that you can tell us about?
Probably not then to talk about yet. We're still in that phase where people are deciding if they're running, how it's going to shake out. So we're kind of looking to see who's going to be best to work for.
And any insight into what Governor Youngkin's going to do after he leaves? He's term limited, so he's leaving.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that this year's an election year in Virginia, and the governor's always been very supportive of folks down the ticket. So I assume 2025 is going to be a busy last few months of his term for him.
All right. Now, I just removed Chris Jackson. I hope that didn't block him from coming back. So I'm going to ask my colleagues to see if he can get him back. I couldn't stand watching him freeze for so long. It's making me uncomfortable.
He's logging back on. He's
all right. While we do that, Kristin, let me just ask you about Pete Hegseth. What's your sense of his status as Pentagon Secretary? Is that rock solid, or is he in some peril?
I would say it's pretty solid. He's weathered a number of storms, but he's also doing what I think President Trump had appointed him to do with the different goals for the Department of Defense there, namely, increasing recruitment, bringing I think Secretary Hegseth has called it back to a warrior mentality. And so in terms of actually delivering, I think the secretary's done that. If he's weathered the storms thus far, I think he'll be able to hold on for quite some time. Maybe not the full 4 years, but at least, the first 1 or 2.
I'm kind of vamping because the main 2 things I want to talk about, I want Chris to be here. So I'll ask you something else, which is midterm elections. There's some reporting today about all the things that the Team Trump are doing to try to hold the House of Representatives, maybe even pick up seats. We talk a lot about candidate recruitment. Tell us how candidate recruitment works. How does the White House or the NRCC, how do they recruit people to run?
Well, there are a number of different ways to do it. Sometimes consultants do it. Sometimes governors do it in their states as well. But, I read that article as well. It's usually kind of finding folks either in the district or the state that have the right profile for where they're going to be running, have the right approach, and picking up the phone, calling them, asking them if they've ever considered it. Sometimes they get a no. Other times it's someone that is all on board or already running, and usually get other members of Congress, other senators to call. Georgia's a great example. There were so many reports of how many senators were trying to recruit Governor Kemp to run for Senate there. Obviously, that one wasn't successful, but I assume we will see in a number of these different states that effort continue, particularly in some of these open seats in Congress. But getting the call from the White House that saying that the White House will be behind you if you decide to run for this seat should move a number of different folks to run. But I think overall, looking at the midterms, I think you talked about this on one of the episodes last week. The Republicans, aside from candidate recruitment, because obviously that's important, but those members who are currently in office and have to defend their seats, it would be beneficial for them to get on the same page and to go on very intense offense here.
Right.
And don't wait till next year. All too often we see candidates and incumbents make the mistake of coasting the year before. They have time on their side right now. And I don't think there's really been a comparable time where the opposition party has been so unfocused and a little bit of a disarray. So this is a huge gift for Republicans in the White House, I would think. Take advantage of it and get everyone on the same page. You don't have everyone tweeting all different things and finding their own special part of the bill. Find the things that work in overall in the districts and the states and just go on offense. Make Democrats defend keeping illegal immigrants on Medicaid rolls. Make them defend, things like that. Because if they wait and Democrats get their act together, they'll go on offense. And then it's never an easy thing to play from a position of weakness or defense.
All right, you play White House political director. I'm a business person in Kentucky thinking about running for office, and you really want the White House political operation really wants me in the race. Okay, so go ahead, make just like a short pitch, like Mark. We really want you to run.
The president really wants you to run for the seat. You have all the looking at the path to victory here with the president on your side. We'll make sure you have the resources and the support that you need, but you have right now the door is open for you. And if you've ever thought about doing this before, now is the time. Just if you miss this opportunity, who knows down the road if it'll ever come up again. So it's to give it a shot, and we'll all be with you.
All right, now I'm going to ask you questions, White House political director, and I want you to answer the way the White House political director would. I'll do it, but I want the guarantee the president will raise me $1 million.
Well, we're going to have to make sure we put together a good campaign because if you have a winning campaign, the money follows. So it won't just be
the president can raise me $1 million if he wants to. I'll run if he'll raise me $1 million. Otherwise, I don't think I will.
Well, we'll have to go back and see. We have a lot of seats we have to play in. And again, we believe in you as a candidate.
Click. Click didn't work. All right. Thank you for that. Chris, welcome back. Weak internet in Tennessee generally?
In a lot of places, but that's a hell of a debut for me. I can say that.
All right. Well, welcome back. Just to finish up, are you a consultant now? Is that your profession?
No, I actually work in higher education as my professional job, but on the side as a party leader and a chairman, I do help other candidates if they seek my advice. So nothing professionally in the consulting range.
All right. Now, the thing I know you best for is you have an extraordinary, what we used to call a Twitter game, but X game. You're very active on that platform, and you're unapologetically in support of your party and opposition to the other party. So
right.
How did that come to be? How did you become so notably active on X?
Well, it started during the 2020 campaign. I got involved in the Biden campaign early on. I was an endorser as an elected official, and I worked with the campaign. We really had bare bones back then during a lot of the primary. And, I got lucky to talk and meet with a lot of the folks that were in charge of the campaign. And, my following grew from there, and it's just opened up a lot of opportunities. And, it's given me a platform to put my vision out there and what I believe on the issues of the day. And, it's always fun to hear other people's as well.
Do you have a lot of friends who are Republicans?
If I didn't around here, I would be very friendless because that's all that's in Tennessee.
Right. All right. Let me ask you one more question, and I apologize for having some of your biographical details incorrect.
Sure.
What's the story of how Tennessee went from a purplish state to a solid red state? What happened in Tennessee that caused that?
I believe it's the transformation of the Democratic Party on a lot of the social issues. I still believe the Democratic Party at heart represents the people of Tennessee on economics and issues like defense, things like that. But, I think you lose a lot of people around here when you get into some of these more divisive cultural issues as far as abortion, the trans issue, things like that. Most folks they're not necessarily pro-abortion, but they're pro-choice. But a lot of especially like the trans issue, the last election, it's just a bridge too far for a lot of people around here.
Okay. if you were given $10 million to try to help revive the Democratic Party of Tennessee, what would you spend it on?
Uh, I would seriously tell people to look at somebody like Andy Beshear in Kentucky. I think Andy Beshear is a prime example of a Democrat that has figured out how to win in a red state and how to talk to people. I think it's pretty simple at the fundamental level, but Democrats want to continue to throw money at consultants, as we saw in the last couple of days about how to talk to men, things like that. I believe that's a mistake. I believe we just need to look at people like Andy who have success, learn from them, and I think we can start to claw back in some of these southern states.
All right. Very grateful to you both for being here. I'm just going to run through headlines and then ask you all both to comment. And
Sure.
if it's not something you're comfortable with, you can just say pass or phone a friend. And again, if you want to get in on the conversation, please raise your hand. Number one, please. President Trump today on Truth Social once again questioned Vladimir Putin's path in not being willing to engage in peace talks. Trump says Putin is, quote, playing with fire. President has indicated he's weighing additional sanctions on Russia, potentially as soon as this week. Number two, on Truth Social, just to give you a little bit more flavor of the president's here. Putin doesn't realize that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia. And I mean, all caps, real bad. He's playing with fire, exclamation point. Kristin, would you say the American people are on the question of confronting Russia over Ukraine? And where do you think that might differ from the president?
I think that many, let's just say, even Trump supporters, so 76 million people, I think they're going to take their cues from the president on this. I think after 4 years of failed leadership under Biden, the conflict beginning under the Biden administration, I think most Americans are looking to President Trump for leadership, for direction. And I think that this has been a positive development. He was getting criticized for being too soft, on Putin and Russia before. So I think the fact that now he's taking this harder stance is actually more encouraging, and many Americans will kind of follow along, his words on that, because I think he tried having these discussions. Putin isn't doing, frankly, what the United States and the president had wanted him to. And now President Trump is being a strong leader and saying that we're not going to tolerate it. So I think that most Americans at this point will stick with the president along this journey when it comes to this conflict. We'll see where that ends and how long that support stays with him. But I think for now, considering the extreme contrast between a Biden administration and a Trump administration, especially on foreign policy, most Americans, even more moderate, are going to give President Trump the benefit of the doubt because he's showing strong leadership here where we didn't have it before.
Chris, I guarantee you, Kristin wasn't trying to purposely provoke you by invoking President Biden's failed leadership on Ukraine. But where do you think before you address the politics of it, where do you think the American people are? Are they supportive of sanctions? Are they supportive of confronting Russia, more military aid, or not? Would you say?
I would say the people in the middle are. I think they're for punishing Russia in whatever matter of a way that's effective. She's right. The Republican Party will follow Trump in whatever direction that he goes in. But I have a totally different take. I don't think any of this represents strength. I think it's weakness on a international stage. The guy's been in office 5 to 6 months now, and for the first 5 months, he coddled Vladimir Putin and blamed Zelensky for the war. He belittled Zelensky in the Oval Office. He's basically crapped on NATO every chance that he's gotten. And, you can say what you want to about Joe Biden, but Joe Biden rebuilt NATO after the first Trump administration, united the world, basically everyone against Vladimir Putin. And we had Putin on the ropes, basically at a draw for the longest. But here comes Trump in, and, we're basically toting the same Kremlin talking points that he always does, saying that Putin has been treated very unfairly. Like I said, that Zelensky was the provocateur in this whole thing. So, if he's saying he's playing with fire, it's because Trump gave him the matches.
So, Chris, I just want to ask you, and again, I'm not trying to provoke a conflict. I just want to understand.
Yeah.
I think you definitely are right that President Biden rallied a coalition of the willing against Russia and sanctions and military aid and rhetoric. But I also think it's fair to say that when he handed the situation over to Donald Trump, it was not a good situation for the world or for Ukraine. Some said he didn't do enough and that he was too restrained in helping Ukraine. But can you argue with a straight face that the situation was actually very good for the world and for Ukraine by the time Joe Biden left office?
I'm not going to say it was a good situation anytime, because I think it's terrible. I don't think there's a good solution to this.
Yeah.
Anytime you have a dictator that invades a sovereign country and refuses to leave, there's no good outcome in that other than him leaving. And for the United States leader to suggest that the guy that was invaded is actually the provocateur of this world sends a terrible message.
Right. I agree with you on that. And just last one for you. If President Trump came out and announced, I'm rallying NATO,
Sure.
I'm going to arm Ukraine. I tried to give this guy Putin a chance, but he is a dictator and a thug, and we are going to defeat him on the battlefield and with sanctions. Would you go on Twitter and say, "Bravo, President Trump"? Or there's nothing that he could do on this issue that you'd applaud publicly?
I don't think that we need to send ground troops, but if he was serious about the sanctions and putting the blame where it squarely is and funding Ukraine so they could win this war finally, I would give him credit because I think that's in the best interest of not only the United States security and the world.
But would you promise me you'd use your vaunted Twitter account to applaud him?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
I look forward to that if it happens. Kristin, how do you feel about President Trump? Although he's changed in the last 72 hours, how do you feel about him regularly saying nice things about Putin and blaming Zelensky for the start of the war? Do you find that perfectly fine, or does that trouble you?
Trouble wouldn't be the right word. I'm probably more in the camp where I think Putin is a dictator and a terrible leader and terrible for the world order. So the words themselves, I personally don't love. However, kind of with many of the things that maybe on the initial conversation don't agree with President Trump, trusting his process and how to get to something, if bringing people to the table, even though most of us agree that Putin is a dictator and upending the world order, trusting the process where Trump can bring him and others to the table to try to get a deal that ends the conflict, was willing to give that benefit of the doubt, even though I didn't necessarily love, favorable Putin language. So I have been very happy to see the president now that those discussions haven't resulted in a resolution, holding the fire to Putin to come around or, as he says, face the fire.
Yeah. And this is what I say about Trump all the time to critics. If he said, I think Vladimir Putin is the most handsome, brilliant, loving person I've ever met, and then he ends the war on good terms, I'm all fine with it. Like, right. I don't care that he says that, but if he doesn't, then it's not great. All right. Number 4, this war the president has against Harvard is I think an overcovered story. I just do. The press is obsessed with it, but there's a lot of important elements here. And so now the president is basically, he found $100 million left that he hadn't taken from Harvard. And so now a letter to Harvard today says ends all contracts. And number 5, they're pausing all student visas. So now this doesn't just affect Harvard, but any ability of an American college or university to accept a student from overseas may be in jeopardy. We've talked about this a lot on the platform. Kristin, how do you feel about, and the courts may say this is all impossible, but how do you feel about the president's, I'll call it a war on Harvard? Is it interesting to you? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it's a sideshow? How do you feel about it?
I don't really pay too much attention to it. And when I talk to colleagues, they don't either. However, for this discussion, I think it's important to take a step back and ask why it's happening. The reason why this is happening against Harvard and some of these other Ivy Leagues is because they as institutions have allowed protest and violence against certain members of their community without any repercussion. And so, Harvard and Penn and Yale and all these schools can't have it both ways. They can't say they want to allow terrorist sympathizing activity on their campuses and then not have to answer for it. Harvard is not entitled to federal funds to keep them going. And if they don't adjust their policies to be more in line with what this administration and frankly voters voted for, then no one's saying they have to stop doing it. They're just not going to get federal funds to keep that activity up. So Harvard just needs to figure out if they want to maintain their curriculum and just keep turning a blind eye to anti-Israel protests, then they can go figure out how to go ask their alumni to, supplement the money that they would have otherwise received from the federal government.
Chris, Al Gore is a proud son of Harvard. But my guess is if I walked around Tennessee, I wouldn't find too many people concerned with this. But what's your view of, to the extent you see it, what's the importance of this, if any?
Well, I think it's just more red meat that he's throwing to the base. This is classic Trump. He's always got to have a foil somewhere, and this is perfect for his base and on Fox News. It's basically just a childish vendetta dressed up as policy. And at the end of the day, all he's doing is cutting off in very important research, like cancer research and medical grants. They're going to end up hurting a lot of people, especially people that voted for him, because those are the folks that need help the most. It's more authoritarian than anything, because it's just cutting off dissent if they don't bow down and kiss the ring, like some of these other organizations have done. But I'm like you, I haven't paid it much attention. I just think it's a terrible precedence to set by a president of the United States.
So President Trump apparently heard me say early in the program that there's not much going on, because he's just going on a tear on Truth Social to provide more content for us. He truthed about the auto pen issue, which
Okay.
I refuse to talk about that, at least not tonight. Truth about the auto pen issue, and he sent a couple truths saying he's been great for Alaska and Maine. Not sure why he picked those two states, except perhaps because the two Republican senators who give him the most trouble, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, are from those states. Not sure. All right, we'll keep watching on Truth. A couple more issues, then we'll go to your questions. So please raise your hand if you want in on the conversation. So King Charles has been in Canada, is on the second day of the 2-day trip, talking about the sovereignty of Canada. Some on the right find it humorous that the King of England is talking about the sovereignty of Canada, since they're under the thumb to some extent of the British monarchy. But President Trump, 13A, please, tweeted, or Truth today, about Canada, and said this: I told Canada, which very much wants to be part of the fabulous Golden Dome system, that's the Star Wars missile defense system, that will cost $61 billion if they remain a separate but unequal nation, but will cost $0 if they become our cherished 51st state. They are considering the offer. Chris Jackson, I know you think this is all just a bunch of, if you pardon the expression, malarkey.
Yeah.
But from as a veteran political strategist, what do you think the president's interest is in continuing to talk about making Canada the 51st state?
Again, I just think it's a distraction. It takes away from other issues, like the corruption that's going on within his administration. It gives the media something to talk about. He understands this full well. Distractions are part of his MO at this point. And, it just goes back to a chaotic, foreign policy under this guy. He's trying to bully our allies. He's praising autocrats. Canada is one of our best partners in defense, trade, and in securing democracy. So I don't know what the hell he's doing, but it's just an embarrassment on the world stage, just like the thing with Panama and Greenland. They're all distractions.
Kristin.
So, we could say maybe the tweet itself. I mean, the bigger picture here is what Americans voted for was an end to this unending checkbook that, frankly, Republican and Democratic administrations had that policy for years. Just write a check, give away more taxpayer dollars to foreign countries rather than taking care of people at home. And, that's why I think in this case, it's smart to have this conversation, because Canada, we shouldn't be spending, exorbitant amounts of money to defend other countries instead of having that money at home. That is what Americans of both parties, frankly, would support. You mentioned Greenland and Panama. I mean, Greenland is national. I mean, when we look at where the next conflicts are going to occur, it is going to be in the Arctic. The Arctic China is going there. Other places are going. It makes sense for us to have Greenland under, and you talk to most national security experts, they would agree with you. So I think we could say it's a distraction, but overall it's in line with what the president's foreign policy has been and what Americans voted for, which is stop this, limitless cash flow to foreign countries and have them pony up and start paying for some of it themselves. Of course, NATO and Canada and all these other countries are not going to foot the bill for things if we keep sending the money without any check and balance. And so I think this is in line exactly with what the president had promised and what Americans voted for, which is enough is enough. It's time for other countries to start stepping up and doing what they can. And Americans need to stop shouldering the entire world in a sense.
Chris, I'm so grateful to you for coming on. And we've talked about this before. We have not as many folks representing your point of view on a regular basis as we'd like. We don't have none, but not as much as we'd like. And I'm just wondering how you feel, because this is a recurring theme here. Kristin, I'm sure you can tell, is a very smart and reasonable person, right? And she's saying basically, Donald Trump talking about these things, Greenland, Canada, perfectly consistent with what the American people voted for. Does that give you agita, as we say in Tennessee, or does it help you better understand the president?
I don't think that dog hunts, to use another Tennessee saying. I don't know any American that voted to bully Canada, to bully Mexico, to bully our NATO partners in the world. They voted for Trump basically because they thought he could revive the economy and that he could clear out some of the conflicts that we've been engaged in. And so far, all he's done is instilled chaos into the economy. And the wars in Israel and Ukraine have only widened. So I just don't see that he's following through on what the American people wanted.
All right, one more topic, and then we're going to go to your question. So please raise your hand. All right. Either of you know who Todd and Julie Chrisley are?
I love the show.
You love the show. How long has the show been off the air, Kristin?
Oh gosh, for a few years, but the reruns are always on.
Okay. So, what's the premise of their reality show?
It's just kind of following this Georgia family around and the shenanigans they get into. I mean, it's reality TV. We all have our vices, and so reality TV is mine.
Do they own a business called Meatco? I don't know what that is. Meatco.
I don't remember.
What do they do? Like, do they have job? Like, you're following their family life, their professional life. What do they do?
It's mostly their family life, and so you don't really the show. They didn't really get too much into the business, but it's clear they had some money, and so it's following the kids as they grow up and different things they do.
Chris, did you watch that show?
My wife made me watch it several times. I'm not a fan, but I've been forced to watch it.
All right. So this couple, and just to be clear, I feel about reality TV the way I feel about smoking and gambling. You can reach your own conclusions how I feel about those three things. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. And these people look like perfectly nice people, but I would sooner spend 5 minutes with them than I would spend 5 minutes trying to invade Canada. All right. So the Chrisley's daughter spoke at the Republican convention. I don't know which one, but some Republican convention. And they I don't know if they pled guilty or convicted, but they were sentenced to fairly long prison terms for tax fraud and business fraud. And the president pardoned them. And today, the White House released video of the president on the phone with their daughter, announcing that he was pardoning her parents. This is number 3, please.
It's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing, but it's a great thing because your parents are going to be free and clean, and I hope we can do it by tomorrow. Is that okay? We'll try getting it done tomorrow. So wonderful. Give them, I don't know them, but give them my regards and wish them a good life.
Mr. President.
Yes. How are you?
I just want to say thank you for bringing my parents back.
Yeah, well, they were given a pretty harsh treatment based on what I'm hearing. Pretty harsh treatment.
Yes, sir.
Was your brother fighting also for this release, right?
Hey, I go to the University of Alabama, and I saw you speak, and I said, that's the greatest presidential speech I've ever heard in my life.
Oh, that's good. I was just there. I gave the commencement. What a great group of people. If you were in the audience, you have to be good. What a good school it was, and I love Alabama. I love Alabama. It's that school is really, that was very impressive when I was there. Yeah, I think I did a good job. I got a lot of good comments on that one. So that's good. I love.
All right. We can dump out of that now, Chris. There's a New York Times story that just ran this afternoon about someone else the president pardoned, whose mom gave $1 million. Clearly, the president is exercising his congressionally unfettered power to pardon with impunity. And I saw you rolling your eyes. I'm not quite sure, but why? You maybe explain. But here's the question I want to ask you. Joe Biden pardoned his family, right? So it's very difficult for me to see how Democrats can be critical of President Trump's use of the pardon power. Not every, apples to apples, et cetera. But do you feel like your party's in a position to criticize the abuse of the pardon power after what Joe Biden did?
Well, I think they're two fundamentally different situations. You know, Joe Biden did those preemptive pardons in large part because of the threats that Trump and his allies were making before they came into office.
Well, hold on, Chris. I just want to interrupt you. That might be why he did it, but he might have done it because his family committed crimes and he didn't want him to go to prison. And he said he wouldn't. And he said he wouldn't pardon Hunter, and then he did. So every case is different.
Sure.
But you say he did it to ward off wrongful prosecutions or the threat of that, or the worry of that. But is that really a sufficient defense to lie about whether he was going to pardon his son?
Well, I think it is what it is. You know, he said from the very beginning that he was going to look at each case and
No, he said from the very beginning he wouldn't pardon his son. And I'm going to ask Kristin the same question, comparable questions, but I worry about the moral authority that your party has sacrificed to criticize, because there's lots to criticize in these Trump pardons.
Sure.
But I worry that your party has no capacity to do that now, because President Biden said repeatedly he would not pardon his son. And then not only did he preemptively pardon his son, he pardoned him for convictions, but then he preemptively pardoned him for everything dating back to a certain day. And then he pardoned other members of his family. So again, how can your party say we sit in judgment of Donald Trump's abuse of the pardon power after that?
Well, as I was saying, I think they're two fundamentally different things. You know, Donald Trump was on record making threats of investigations, prosecutions, things like that. That's why Joe Biden did this. He
But Chris, here's why I'm pressing you, because the only thing I'm really going to press you on, because you are so dogged in your defense of Joe Biden.
Sure.
You're so dogged, and you're very popular with a lot of people I know, because they say, here's a guy out there fighting for us. But just to say that every case is different, and these two cases are different, I think, with all due respect, it's just a flim flam. They are different, but there's the moral authority to say a president should not abuse the pardon power.
Sure.
That's universal. And you're saying you're making up excuses for Joe Biden lying about whether he'd pardon Hunter, and then preemptively pardoning. I never heard Donald Trump said Joe Biden's sister and sister-in-law, I forget if he pardoned his sister, I think he did, but his brothers, I never heard Donald Trump threaten to prosecute his brothers.
Oh, absolutely, they did.
No,
That was part of the whole congressional investigation.
The congressional investigation, but I never heard Donald Trump say, I'm going to order my Justice Department to, I may have missed it, but I don't think
They're
he
still
did.
talking about it, Mark. I mean, they're still wanting to investigate the Biden crime family, as they call them. You know, they investigated them for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And what did they find?
They found that Joe Biden and his family profited heavily from the family trading on the name of an elected official, the vice president, then a presidential candidate. That's what they found. They did a horrible job.
And there was nothing illegal about what they found.
Well, your fellow Tennessean did such a horrible job that he screwed the whole thing up. I don't know if there was anything illegal, but it was an abuse of power. So I don't think you can say they did nothing wrong because Congressman Comer's incompetent. I just don't think he can. All right. Let me say one more thing, because I don't want to interrupt you, and then I'm going to ask Kristin about these Trump pardons.
I was just going to say about the pardons, it goes to the whole theory of Donald Trump. If you've got money, access, or you're a celebrity, he's going to look at a pardon. But he ignores the people that are sitting in jail on low-level drug charges and other things that should be getting these pardons. And the bulk of the pardons that Joe Biden did while he was in office focused on that, giving people second chances on issues like that. Everybody likes to focus on the family pardons and the pardons of Milley and Fauci, but by and large, the most pardons were for low-level drug offenses. That was a campaign promise that Biden fulfilled.
Yes, sir, you're right. Although some of those people probably shouldn't have gotten pardons from what I've read, but I take your point. Kristin, the silence of Republicans in the face of the abuse of the pardon power by your president, Republican president, is not a surprise, because he's got the party cowed on almost everything. But shouldn't we live in a country where these pardons are scrutinized in a way, rather than just Donald Trump can now pardon whoever he wants? Haven't we crossed some crazy line where there's just, even the press is barely scrutinizing these anymore?
Well, I would say the press is not touching them because they know how egregious the Biden pardon was. I mean, we could go and you can, it's been done in previous administrations as well, you know, Scooter Libby, you can go back to President Ford, pardoning Nixon. I mean, they have always kind of had a healthy amount of scrutiny around these pardons. However, the last minute breaking of the promise of not to pardon his son, pardoning his, you know, family members that frankly Americans had never heard of before for crimes spanning 14 years. I think even the media won't touch Trump's pardons because they don't want to talk about how egregious that was. So that really has changed the discussion around these. We can argue whether or not Biden had, President Biden had the right to pardon his family or why he did. We can certainly have that debate. I just don't think that it matters because the truth of it is that changed, that's reset the entire process. Because now, Trump has not pardoned anyone along those lines, or for
Well,
those.
he just pardoned someone after the guy's mom gave him $1 million. I mean,
Well, they're Trump supporters. I don't know if you can say one is against the other. You'd have to go back and look and see how many of Biden or Clinton's or however many
all right. Let's do it as a hypothetical. Say you're senior advisor to the president, and the president says, the council says we're thinking of pardoning this person, and somebody says, well, Mr. President, you just took $1 million from that person's mom. Would you say, Mr. President, probably not a good time to pardon that person? Or you'd say, well, what does it matter?
I mean, it would probably depend on what other things you needed to talk about that day, but probably would have raised it as, hey, this could be a potential issue. However, I mean, we forget who we're dealing with here in terms of, the amount of cases and persecution that President Trump had been under through the entire campaign last year. It does create a different lens. It does give him a different position versus any other president. The fact that, liberal courts and I mean, he was indicted on 34 counts. I mean, that is why people continue to rally against him. So I think he does get a little bit more leeway on this type of thing because the general view, and I think, a huge factor in why he surged to the top of the polls when he did, is because Americans felt that he was being victimized, was being persecuted by the system itself. And so I think he does get a little bit more wiggle room. And frankly, I don't see a lot of people freaking out about who he pardons, this and that. Those two factors, the fact that Trump himself had been persecuted for over a year, and the fact that Biden really, really, abused the system on his way out the door, I think keeps this to the, the side where people don't really give it that much attention. And I would advise Democrats not to get hyperbolic about it, just like, obsessing over who Trump apparently is bullying or not, the words he uses, I mean, let it roll. If Democrats are focused on tweets and who he's pardoning and not focused more on the fact that they have to pay $20 million to learn how to talk to white men, I mean, they're never going to get out of this ditch. And more states will start to look like Tennessee that were once Democrat and shifting to Republicans. I mean, it's not the fight that Democrats should be taking because no one really cares.
Mark, what about Trump pardoning his son-in-law's father and then making him an ambassador? That hardly got any attention.
Yeah, I agree. But I think they both so abused the pardon power that everybody's tribal about it now. And I respect both of you a great deal. And I listen closely to what you said. And I say this with respect, and you two aren't the only ones who would fit this. It's become so partisan. I agree that Donald Trump was improperly prosecuted. And it's not just my opinion. It's the view of almost every liberal legal analyst who looked at it. But I don't think that gives him carte blanche to pardon people who give him $1 million. And I agree that the Biden family had reason to believe that there would be potentially future prosecutions of the Biden family because of the congressional investigations and because of Donald Trump's history. But I don't think that gives him carte blanche to pardon his family, a preemptive pardon going back 10 years, unprecedented in American history, after he promised not to pardon his son repeatedly. So that's what troubles me because I see why both sides feel the way they do, but it's no way to run a railroad. All right, enough, because we got to get folks in. Thank you both. Here we go. Let's start with my friend Ray, who lives in Ohio and is a great journalist and columnist. Ray, welcome in. Question for Kristin and Chris.
Sure, I've got one quick comment, and then I have a question. As much as I respect my friend Mark, I'm going to differ on the Harvard story. I think it is a big deal that is not being covered properly. There's too much blocking and tackling. Trump takes away $100 million, but not enough input on the impact that this is going to have downstream, not only on medical research, but also on things that are happening, for example, in my community. As a matter of fact, I'm writing about that. So I have what is not a simple question that I would love to hear your guests answer to. In the United States of America, you can protest against anything, peacefully protest against anything. You can protest with a plan, you can protest. If you're Proud Boys, you can protest. Why can't college kids peacefully protest on American campuses. I'm not talking about what happened at Columbia, in which kids took over part of a building. I'm not talking about what happened at Harvard, where one kid tore down the picture of a little baby who was taken hostage and killed. That stuff is obviously repugnant. But why can't there was a peaceful protest of 40 kids at Harvard last week that the Trump administration is turning into an anti-Semitic vehicle, but it wasn't. So why can't people peacefully protest for Palestine?
Who says they
without
can't?
being judged?
Who without being judged?
Without
Or-
being judged, yeah.
All
Without
right,
being judged.
all right, Chris.
Well, I've always said that everybody, even if I disagree with them vehemently, should have the right to protest, so long as they're not making threats, committing violence, destroying things. As President Biden said, there's no place in America for political violence. And as much as I abhor some of the things that the pro-Palestinian groups say, they have a right to say it. And I think the Trump administration is using this as a way to punish people that disagree with them. Like I said, it's red meat for their base. I tend to disagree with a lot of what they say. You know, I think they hurt Kamala Harris and Joe Biden considerably in the last election. And coming into office now, Donald Trump has done more to give Israel and Netanyahu carte blanche to do what they want to than Joe Biden ever thought about doing. So that kind of blew up in their face. But I'm kind of with you. You know, so long as somebody is not committing violence or making threats or destroying property, they should have a right to express an opinion no matter what it is.
Kristin.
Well, I guess Mark, you asked the question I was thinking is who's saying that they can't peacefully protest? I think the issue here is a lot of these protests, and I don't know the details of the 40-person one that you're specifically referring to. However, so many of these protests do not end peacefully and are not focused on just, expressing a point of view. They chant death to Israel. And I mean, the viewpoint of this group of people when they are protesting why it turns violent is because they do want to wipe a nation of people off the face of the earth. And when they're done with them, they're coming for America. Like, that's how this goes. That's the shift. And so I think the reason why this topic has, because they usually don't stay peaceful. The end goal that usually a lot of these protests, particularly the ones in Colombia and elsewhere, they end in violence, and violence is the goal because the goal is to eradicate a certain group of people from the earth.
Ray, I think
Mark,
there's well, just two things. One is
go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
Okay. One is one of the issues, which wasn't much debated in America before, but is now, is what kind of rights people in this country, either illegally or on certain types of visas, have. And I think the Trump administration has said if an American citizen on a college campus says a certain thing, that's going to be protected and respected, if not disagreed with. But if it's someone here on a student visa, they don't have the same right to say things. And then the other is there's you go back to the Skokie case in Illinois, where Nazi sympathizers protested, wanted to do a march in a community that had a lot of Jewish Americans and Holocaust survivors. And the ACLU, which was back then a civil liberties organization, not a liberal organization, defended the Nazi sympathizers' right to march. I think there's an argument that a peaceful protest that somehow bothers Jewish students is not protected. I don't agree with that point of view. I think there needs to be find a way to protect the Jewish students. But I think those are the two categories where peaceful protests are being questioned and criticized. I think that peaceful protests by American citizens on college campuses, I think you'd find very few people who would say, regardless of the content, that should be criticized for its existence. Maybe criticize the content, but I think it's violent protests. It's protests that somehow upset Jewish students, and protests by people who are in this country not as citizens that are at issue. That's what I think.
You said it far better than I did. But the last thing I'll say, then I'll get off. The point about words and protests that upset people. There are plenty of words and protests that upset me.
Yeah.
But I fully support,
of course,
anybody's right to say that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my
Yeah.
point.
All right, Ray, thank you. And I didn't mean to minimize the Harvard thing. I just amazed at how much coverage there is of that, often to the exclusion of other things. Reed, welcome in. Thank you for joining. Unmute. Oh, we lost Reed there. Just I brought him in. His camera shut down. Reed, you there?
Yes.
All right, Reed, we lost your picture and I can barely hear you, but try one more time.
You must be from Tennessee too.
How's that?
It's good enough for good enough. Good, no, not good enough. Reed, I'm gonna have to mute you, Reed. I'm having trouble muting you. That's odd. Let's see if I can. Reed, we're having trouble hearing you. I apologize. All right, Mike Bowman, welcome in. Your signal looks clean as good people of Kentucky.
Hello. Yeah, Mike Bowman, Texas Republican. Wanted to address the.
Go ahead, Mike. You're good. Go ahead.
Yeah. Can you still hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Wanted to address this Russia-Ukraine war. There's a big elephant in the room. There's 2008 action by Bush to start inviting Ukraine into NATO. Imagine if Russia started inviting Mexico into their military alliance. Then there was 2014 when there was a coup. So then there's 2021. Biden's asked by Putin, can you please just drop this thing about bringing Ukraine into NATO? And this is whenever tanks were sitting out north of Ukraine, I think in Belarus. So we just need to unwind this thing. I see this as completely generated by us, the United States, unfortunately. And we need to unwind this. I think the two heads of state should get together, Putin and Trump, and quietly figure out a way to unwind this thing.
All right, hold on, Mike. Go ahead, Chris.
There's one person responsible for the Ukraine-Russia war, and he resides in Russia. It's Vladimir Putin. You know, I don't agree with anybody that suggests that Zelensky was at fault for it or the United States. It's one person, and we need to be very clear about that because our language around issues like this matter, and that's all that needs to be said, I think.
I do
Chris?
not
Yeah.
blame Zelensky.
Yeah.
I do not blame. Go ahead, Kristin, if you want to.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Kristin, go ahead.
I agree. I think Chris and I probably are more similar on this one.
Yeah, Mike, thank you. Go ahead. Finish up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do not blame Zelensky, but
Oh, Mike, you got to unmute. I apologize. Go ahead.
I do not blame Zelensky. But what if we were to see a situation where China and Mexico were making arrangements to have a military alliance, which would have Chinese military technology and even Chinese troops eventually in Mexico? I think we would invade Mexico just like Putin invaded Russia. I mean, Putin invaded Ukraine.
Maybe. It's a hard hypothetical, but I take your point. Mike, thank you. Very grateful to you. All right, let's go back and forth. I want to hear from each of you. What are your top three most contentious state rivalries? Top three. And I'm taking Tennessee, Kentucky off the board because that is number one. Those folks are like Hatfields and McCoys. They just hate each other. Kristin, what are the top three two-state rivalries besides Tennessee and Kentucky?
I'm going to say Ohio and Michigan.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Georgia and Alabama.
That's a pretty good one. Yeah.
Oh, I need one more group.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Pennsylvania and Ohio. I think Ohio gets both sides.
Yeah. Chris, you want to add any to that list?
I would say that's a good list, but I would say Tennessee, especially for where I live, Tennessee and Alabama is a matchup. Tennessee and Florida. I think of Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah, Texas and Oklahoma. You guys, I think got every one, but the one that is the most vicious besides Tennessee and Kentucky is New Hampshire and Massachusetts. I'm serious. I know you think up north we don't fight tough, but those two states, the people in New Hampshire look at Massachusetts like it's like North Korea, just like a totalitarian regime that can't be dealt with. All right, I just want to close and Chris, just tell the story of what you think is going to happen the rest of the year to Donald Trump. By Christmas, where will the Trump administration be?
I think probably we're probably going to be status quo. I really don't see him passing very much significant legislation.
So you think reconciliation just won't pass?
I don't think it will, especially
Okay.
anywhere near the form that it came out of the House of Representatives. So you may have a watered down version, but I don't
Uh-huh.
think it's going to be significant. I don't think there's going to be many deals made on trade. And unless things change, I don't see any progress being made in Ukraine or on the Israel front. Two
And how,
wars that the president said that he would end before he got in the office.
and how do you think the U.S. economy will be by the end of the year?
If Trump leaves it alone, that means imposing no more tariffs, having his language around it curtailed quite a bit. I think it will remain strong. You know, the economy throughout the Biden years and for the start of the Trump years has been resilience. If the president would just be responsible and leave it alone and make smart investments, maybe in the middle class, people that actually need the help, it'll be fine.
Kristin, where will Trump be by the end of the year?
Well, I'm hopeful that I do think reconciliation will pass. It'll be a little bit different. Probably some of the numbers and caps will be, adjusted to get the Senate on board. But I think that will pass. After that, I agree. I don't think there'll be a whole lot more meaningful legislation passed this year. But I'm hopeful that the Republicans will go on offense, put Democrats on defense. And I am cautiously optimistic that the administration's approach to tariffs and the economy will shift from, your daughter only needs $2, not 30. I hope we get to Christmas and we've shifted our language on that a little bit. And I anticipate that there will be some trade deals announced. The economy will be not as good as Republicans say it will be, but not as bad as Democrats say it will be. So I think it'll be a net positive. But I'm really hopeful that, we as a party can go on offense and I do think we'll be in a strong position, particularly as we shift some of the discussion around the economy so that people are going into the holidays with more money in their pocket and less money going to the government.
Chris, do you ever give like a stem winding speech out in public, like behind a podium where you're just pounding away? Do you do that? Is that in your repertoire?
I have in the past.
Okay, so you're in a stadium of 50,000 people, and all 50,000 voted Biden in 20 and Trump in 24, and you're trying to convince them to vote Democrat. Just here, let's just feel free, stand up if you want to. But what's your closing paragraph?
Well, I would say, has Donald Trump?
I don't want conversational. I want closing, people cheering. I want to hear you rally the
Has
crowd.
Donald Trump followed through on the promises that he made during the last election? Has he lowered your prices? Has he solved the wars in the Middle East and Ukraine? Has he made your life better? Are your families more secure? And, in my estimation, I would say no. I think the president has not fallen through on those promises that he's made. It's been chaotic. He served only a few people, and those are the people close to him and the people that talk good about him. And he's left everybody else to fend for themselves. And, I think that the Democratic Party needs a second look because we've learned from our lessons in the past. We care about the middle class. We're responsible on the world stage. We understand that our words matter, that our allies are important, and that the best way to run an economy is to invest in the middle class and the lower class. So I would say if you're unhappy with the current state of affairs in Washington, D.C., give us a second look.
I didn't prompt Chris in advance. I was going to have to do that. I thought that was outstanding. Kristin, just as a professional consultant, you got any notes for Chris just to punch that up at all?
Yeah, I think you got to start with middle class and not really complain as much, because if I'm a Republican running against you, I'm going to say, have Democrats woken up yet? No, they haven't. They are too worried about defending criminals and finding out which bathroom to go to and not focused enough on getting your money in your pocket. So I think you need to put the middle class to the forefront. Stop whining about Trump. Trump is who he is. His approval is going to be the same the whole way. And we know him. Our approval is not going to change him. Stop focusing on him and start focusing on the voters.
All right. Chris, that was a great speech and a great notes from Kristin. So Rev 1 is going to have middle class at the top, less about Trump, more about the future, and more of this. Got to do a little bit more of this.
Bill Clinton.
Yeah, exactly.
At the end. Yeah.
Exactly. Kristin, so grateful to you whenever you come back. And I couldn't be happier, Chris, to finally have you on. And I hope you'll come back regularly too. Just really loved having you here. All right. Thanks to you both. Thanks to you both. All right. Tomorrow morning here, 9 a.m. Eastern time, the morning meeting. But before that, in 1 minute, Michael Moynihan's The Moynihan Report. Jeff Jarvis is his guest. It was taped a little bit earlier, so you can't watch it on two-way, but you can watch it on YouTube. Please do, either live as it unfurls here, live as it unfurls, or on demand whenever you want. Again, you can also join me at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Also tomorrow, Meghan McCain, noon Eastern time, for Citizen McCain, her guest, Lachlan Cartwright, the co-founder of Breaker Media, who writes a media newsletter, and his rapport with Meghan is outstanding. So I recommend that to you, noon tomorrow. And then, as I said earlier in the show, my new episode of my show, Next Up, on Megyn Kelly Network. You can watch it now on YouTube or listen to it as a podcast. Congressman Richie Torres joined me, and Batya and Bridget from my two-way colleagues also joined me, as well as the CEO of one of America's top pot companies, marijuana companies, talk about the status of marijuana in America, both for medicinal use and also for what I call recreational use. She calls it something else I can't remember. Plus, my reported monologue on what Washington's top lobbyists are telling their clients about how to thrive and survive in Trump 2.0. All of that, believe it or not, in one action-packed episode of Next Up. I would be very grateful to you if you'd go watch it, like, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. Please do all those things. Grateful to you for watching, grateful to our two guests, and I'll see you at 9 a.m. Eastern time tomorrow with Sean and Dan for the morning meeting. I close the show with solemnity, grace, peace, love, and understanding with three simple words. Let's go Knicks. Good night, everybody.